This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up and welcome to Hot Take Reactions, where I react to your hot takes of the week, going through the comment section of my videos. So this day, I'm going to start this day. I'm not Edge. On this video, I'm going to start with Martin Emerson is one of the best defensive backs in football. Brad Phillips says, what about Hopkins kick? A 55-yarder and 13-mile-per-hour winner. If he misses it, the Jags taking this out in OT in the last drive. Now, I don't know if it's that deep, but I did forget to put Dustin Hopkins in the winner category for my winners and losers video. So my bad, Dustin. I have this bad habit of only thinking about offense and defense when I do those videos. Got to start incorporating special teams, especially as special teams has been, because also Corey Bojorquez was balling in this game as well. Now, as far as like if he misses that field goal, I really don't know if the Jags take you to overtime, because the Browns' strategy defensively would have been very different, right? Like they played a let them score strategy on that last drive for Jacksonville because they really could care less if Jacksonville scored on that drive. If Jacksonville scored on that drive, they were still going to be down 3, and it would have required the Browns to miss an onside kick in order to lose that game, especially after the 2-minute warning. It was a completely different defensive strategy. They were allowing for those points to be scored as long as you were sacrificing time on the clock. Teams will be okay with that in that situation if all they have to do to ensure victory is catch an onside kick, rather than being really aggressive defensively and accidentally allowing for like a big play to happen, similar to what happened against the Jets last year. So I think that probably isn't true, but that kick is still a big deal because it put the game away. It allowed you to play a defensive strategy. It was like, all right, score, I don't care. Just take a little while to do it, because it just allowed you to salt away the game a little bit easier instead of having to worry about getting a true defensive stop. So it made your life a little bit easier for sure. Not a little bit easier for sure if you're the Cleveland Browns. Michael says, think about this. The Browns have beaten 2 of the #1 seeds in the NFL. The Browns have beaten 6 teams with a winning record. The Browns have the 3rd best record in the AFC. The Browns have the same record as the Chiefs with QB4. It's impressive, right? It's impressive. And I remember when the Browns won 11-5, the big criticism of that was that the Browns were paper tigers, right? That they haven't beaten anybody that's good, and whenever they do, they didn't show up and all this stuff, and they didn't beat Pittsburgh. But truth is, you are what your record is, and the Browns' record is not only impressive given what they've gone through, it's impressive just because of what they've done to get to that record. Like, even if Deshaun Watson were healthy, like everybody was healthy, and you were still 8-5, I think that there's a world where people will be like, some people will be disappointed, but I think a lot of people will be like, hey man, look at what those 8 wins entailed. So yeah, it's an impressive year. And again, if we get to 10 wins with this roster being as decimated as it is, I'm going to put it down as one of the more impressive seasons that we've seen from a football team in modern NFL history. And it's going to be the most impressive Browns season since reactivation, bar none. Thank you for the comment though, Mike. Liberty Outdoor Adventures. This is somebody who's been on the channel for a minute. When JOK reads a play, he is right in the backfield so fast, it's insane. Yeah, his spot quickness is just insane. It's some of the most insane stuff you'll ever see. Mitt says it's crazy how good AB is in drafting defensive backs. Cam Mitchell seems like such a steal. Martin Emerson is the 2nd best corner in his draft class. Oh, hold on. Wait. Might be 3rd. I believe he was in the same draft class as Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley. Now, after that, you could throw Martin Emerson in there, but let's not get crazy. Greg is solid AF. Grant is a Pro Bowl safety. And then you also have guys like Hickman, Bell, very good UDFAs too. Crazy scouting there. I think it says a lot about the infrastructure of the secondary that you've been able to plug and play a lot of these defensive backs. Even when it was Joe Woods, I felt like you had that good structure in that secondary. So when you do draft a Greg Newsome, you're able to plug him in. When you do draft a Martin Emerson, you're able to plug him in. When you do draft Grant Delpit, you're able to plug him in. And now you're at a point to where you have a defined defensive ideology that everybody has embraced. So it's just so much easier to plug guys in into different spots because you know where to put them. Again, this is why continuity is important. If you know who you have on the roster, you know your personnel, you know what can fit around your personnel or what can replace spots in your personnel, and it's easier to just get these pieces in the right place. So that's just a fantastic job by Andrew Berry. Breaking DeJuan Jones is out for the year. Grant Delpit. This is the first injury video I made this week. There were multiple. Shout out to Basher, a member here, who says, good stuff, Q. This has been a weird season with all of these injuries, and it's just insane. And to be 8-5 from what we've been through is amazing. I didn't want to sign Flacco. I wanted DTR to get the reps for the rest of the season to make sure he's the number 2 QB. I got to admit, he's looked good so far, and I'm always a fan of this team, how proud they are playing through all these injuries. And yeah, man, like, hey, at this point, the Browns have had so many injuries. You just got to take any surprise with a thumbs up, right? You know, a lot of people want to see what DTR could do because a lot of people are curious about the potential of DTR. But if Joe Flacco's going to step in and play like 2012, then hey, man, you got to roll with it, right? And that's a much better spot to be in. And I think of all the injury spots, I think you're very fortunate at quarterback right now to have Joe Flacco in there and somebody that you have belief in their potential like DTR in case something happens to Joe Flacco. Like, I do feel pretty fine about that quarterback situation, that it's not going to be a disaster. Now, everything else around it has to hold up, but that's a really good spot to be in, despite the fact that you've taken all these injuries. Rye Guy says, can we talk about Nick Harris stepping up and earning his spot on the roster? It looked like he did a great job filling in at center when Ethan Posick went down. This whole team has been stepping up. Our roster has never felt so deep. Yeah, next man up. It's not something that the 2014 Browns could do, right? Like, it wasn't. If injuries happened to that team at the highest level, it was a wrap. And that's kind of what happened to that 2014 Browns team, is that they lost a couple starters and then everything went to hell and high water, or whatever the saying is. And that's something that doesn't happen with this team, because the 2014 team was kind of a flash in the pan. This 2023 team is just a result of years and years of player development. Like, Nick Harris is a great example of this. But I also think another good example of this is James Hudson. Another good example of this is Jerome Ford. Another good example of this is Cedric Tillman. There's a ton of good examples of this up and down the roster. Alex Wright is somebody who's going to have to step up in the absence of a couple people, right? And what I mean by that is, okay, you have your starting center go down. It's okay. We have this dude that we drafted that we feel okay about that can step in, and Nick Harris. So we're fine. DeJuan Jones goes out, bummer, because he's a special player. But, hey, man, we can mitigate the damage because we could throw James Hudson in there, a guy who's been on this team for a little while and knows how to play the position, has stepped up in that spot before and has been fine. We could just throw him in there to play some tackle. We're going to be all right. We have so many spots like this on this team. And again, this goes to show you, not only are you drafting well, but you have a good development plan. And that development plan is putting players in the right places. And the places that those players are being put in are positions of success. This is something that the Browns have not had. Again, I say this all the time. If you ever wonder why Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Cincinnati, despite consistently having less top 50 draft picks than the Cleveland Browns, were always able to outpace the Cleveland Browns in terms of talent until recently. This is why. Because those draft picks don't mean as much when you can't develop anybody. But when you can develop somebody, then all of a sudden you don't need top 50 draft picks to get good players because you're not relying on luck. You're relying on structure. See, that's why you can trade 3 first-round picks for Deshaun Watson and still have Pro Bowl level young talent come in the absence of those first-round picks, because you can develop talent now. You don't have to rely on the first round to get that talent, because when you're drafting in the first round, you're relying on basically hey man, the odds are in my favor. When you need multiple top 5 draft picks in order to get right for a draft class, it's because you can't develop anybody, and you need prospects so talented that they can overcome poor development. But if you are a good spot for development, you all of a sudden don't need to be rushing out there to get the top 2 guys in the draft class in order to put together a good team. Now, for certain star players, you're not developing a Myles Garrett, sure, but you developing all the pieces that you put around Myles Garrett. So, I think that's a big part of being able to play next man up. The Browns have multiple guys in multiple spots where, hey, somebody went down, a big starter went down, but this guy we've been developing for the last couple of years is here. Like DTR, he's going to factor into this at some point, maybe this year, next year, the year after that. But at some point, we're going to be very happy that we developed DTR to step in a moment like this, because I don't think the Deshaun Watson injury stuff's just going to magically go away. There's no sign that it is. He's only getting older. He hasn't really shown a tendency to protect himself. Now, again, his injuries were pretty freak injuries, but he's probably going to get nicked up here and there. I'm not saying he's going to miss another season, but he's probably going to get nicked up here and there. And then DTR is going to have to step in, and we're going to be pretty happy that we developed DTR. Might not be this year. And hell, you can even argue that it was this year, right? Because he came in and won you a game not on the road, but against Pittsburgh. So I say all that to say, the way they go about this is just proof evidence that this is a different franchise than what we had before. And the development that they've been able to do along this roster, it is just the proof. Yes, the Browns are a good organization. Great segue into this video's comments. This was a video talking about how the Browns are what people thought Pittsburgh was, or what people thought that this organization was. They're a good organization. Wilker says, I'd argue it started with Sashi Brown making a few picks, but his fire sale proved culture changing, true common denominator. Paul Depodesta. Yeah, I think Paul Depodesta is where this all starts, because he basically is in charge of the Cleveland Browns. You don't really think of him as in charge because he does a good job of staying in the shadows, but he's basically in charge of long-term planning. He's not there day to day. He's not there micromanaging Andrew Berry or Kevin Stefanski. He's not telling these guys how to do their job. And it's funny to me because when he got hired, people had a lot of issues with the fact that he worked remotely, which is hilarious now how many people work remote. I work remotely. Everybody kind of works remotely now, or a lot of people work remotely now, but that was a big problem with Paul Depodesta in the fan base when they first hired him, and how he wasn't really the day-to-day guy. But that ended up being the best thing about the structure that they set up, is that they hired somebody to pick some guys to be in charge, and then he let those guys be in charge. And when you hire the right people, all of a sudden, it works, right? You hire Andrew Berry, you hire Kevin Stefanski, it works. Now, to the credit, Sashi Brown, and what I like to refer to this as, Sashi Brown basically expansionized the Cleveland Browns. I look at the Browns from 99 to 2016, right before they went 0-6, basically the last year of Johnny Manziel. Those 15 years, that's the original expansion Browns. But past that, right, from 2016 on, it's almost as if the Browns re-expansion themselves because they had two back-to-back first-round picks like an expansion franchise, and they basically started over from zero. And it helps that in those two re-expansion drafts, that I'll call it, that Sashi Brown put you through, you got Myles Garrett, and eventually you got Denzel Ward and all them. Like, you got some good players out of that. But it was a reset, right? You got some talented players. You reset the structure of the organization. You also didn't trade a second and third round pick that ended up being Nick Chubb for AJ McCarron, right? Like, you sat on that, even though ownership wanted to do that. And then it got proven to be one of the most significant moves in franchise history. Like, there's a timeline out here where that trade goes through and this team is in utter disarray because of it. But he sits on that trade, gets fired because of it. And it really does change everything about this team, because having Nick Chubb allows you to have success with Baker Mayfield, which allows you to stick with Kevin Stefanski, which allows you to have continuity, which allows you to get to the points where you're at today. It's crazy. It's crazy, man. So, yeah, Sashi Brown does deserve some more respect. I understand that he is also responsible for some of the worst seasons in Cleveland Browns history, but he was the guy that was willing to say, hey, man, we just going to tear this thing all the way down instead of trying to rebuild off the studs. And that ended up being the right move. Also, Paul Depodesta deserves a lot of credit for being smart enough to know how to lay out the structure, but also smart enough to know what he doesn't need to be involved in day to day. Algorithm says the disrespect on Charlie Hewitt. My bad, Mr. Charlie. I didn't know I didn't put you in that video. I hope you don't take that disrespect too crazy. All right. King Cobb says signing Delpit to an extension mid-season and mid-contract when we thought we'd lose him in free agency is a great example. Yeah, I mean, like, the Browns do this all the time. Their priority isn't on bringing in these big name free agents. Their priority is in keeping their guys that they have, right? The Browns don't really lose significant players in free agency. Like, if you look at since 2020, they haven't lost any of their big name players. Now, JOK might become an interesting case here. But if they lose a player, it's usually because they chose to let go of that player, right? Like a Odell Beckham, a Baker Mayfield. They chose because of performance and fit to get rid of a player like that. But when it comes to the guys who fit and are playing well, they tend to keep all those guys. And again, that builds culture, because if you're at a job that knows, then you know that you can get a promotion from within. You're going to work hard at that job. But if you work at a job and you perceive it as a dead end, you're going to look for the next job. And you're not going to give about this job, right? So again, that's just culture building right there. It's what every other team does. Like, Baltimore doesn't lose a ton of their best free agents all the time. Cincinnati doesn't lose all their best free agents all the time. And Pittsburgh doesn't. The Browns are now adding their names to that list, while it looks like it's a little bit more shaky over in other places. Full Dork says, really good point about keeping the same players on the roster for 4+ years. That's huge. Didn't think about it before. Yeah, just think about how, like, guys like David Njoku and Myles Garrett, who we used to look at as young players, are now like legitimate veteran players, like locker room tentpoles. It's nuts to think about, right? When you remember how much these guys went through, Myles Garrett and the helmet thing, and then he flipping the Porsche. Like, this, some of this stuff wasn't even that long ago, right? But now where we're at, it's real crazy to think about. The next comments are from my Does Ultimate Cleveland Sports Hate Me video. Shout out to G Bush for letting me have some fun with the topic of the video here. Cleveland BCI says Quincy tries so hard to be honest and critical, but not too negative or angry, and Garrett goes off and doesn't care who he insults. It's an excellent team up. Yeah, man. I think sometimes what I like to bring and what I like to remember is that we get so caught up in these little bubbles that you can get caught up in easily that we think it's normal to never talk to somebody who's outside of that bubble, even if you largely agree with them about everything, right? Like, at the end of the day, me and G both want the Browns to win. We just got different ways of thinking of how the Browns are going to win, or different answers or solutions about it. And every once in a while, G will have a take that I disagree with. And then people tag me like I'm supposed to argue with G Bush over this. It's like, nah, man, like this is what you do this for. Like, you know, I don't ever remember being a Browns fan and just being in lockstep agreement with everybody that's ever been a Browns fan around me. You know, me and my dad used to argue about the Browns all the time, and players that we liked and didn't like, and what we thought could be successful and not successful. And as long as you do that with a level of respect, it's part of what makes being a fan fun, is the different approaches to playing the game of this chess that you're going to watch. Right? Like that's what makes it fun, or a part of what makes it fun. So yeah, man, like I love that me and G got different approaches to try to find these answers. And you know, that's my homie. But y'all have a great day. Appreciate y'all for these hot takes. Have a good day. Have a even better night. Peace.